My name is Daniel Kim, and I learned that silence isn't the same as weakness. For 5 years, I thought keeping my head down and doing excellent work would be enough. I thought if I just worked harder, stayed later, solved every problem that landed on my desk, someone would eventually notice. Someone would finally say my name out loud in a room that mattered. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything collapsed. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and the artificial lemon scent they used to clean the glass walls. 23 people sat around the long table, laptops open, phones face down. Our quarterly all-hands meeting. Richard Turner stood at the front, his perfectly pressed suit catching the gray Seattle light filtering through the windows. He was announcing his promotion to senior vice president. I clapped along with everyone else. I was genuinely happy for him, or at least I told myself I was. Richard had been my supervisor for 3 years, and while he wasn't exactly warm, he'd never been cruel, just distant. Then he clicked to the next slide, team structure and development paths. My photo appeared on the screen next to 5 others. Richard smiled that corporate smile, the one that doesn't reach the eyes. Now, I want to talk about how we're leveraging our diverse talent pool. My stomach tightened. Something in his tone felt wrong. Daniel here has his MBA from, he squinted at the slide, Seoul National University. Anyone heard of it? Polite chuckles around the room. My face burned. Seoul National is one of the top universities in Asia. Richard knew that. International experience is great, don't get me wrong, but it's different from understanding American markets, American clients. I sat perfectly still, my hands flat on the table, he continued. Daniel's strength is really in the technical side, support, back-end work. Some people are natural leaders, and some people are better supporting those leaders. Nothing wrong with that. The room had gone quiet. Not the good kind of quiet. The uncomfortable kind where people suddenly find their phones very interesting. Amanda Chen, who sat 2 seats down from me, glanced at me with something like horror in her eyes. I didn't say anything. I just opened my notebook and wrote down the time, 10:47 a.m. Then I wrote exactly what Richard had said, word for word. When the meeting ended, people filed out quickly. Amanda touched my arm as she passed. That wasn't okay, she whispered, but she kept walking. I sat there for a moment longer, staring at my handwriting. 5 years at this company, 5 years of staying late to fix other people's mistakes, 5 years of watching my strategies get presented by other people, 5 years of being told I was doing great in private while being made invisible in public. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Daniel, this is Grace Cho from Catalyst Technologies. We need to talk, not about the project. About you. I stared at the message for a long time. Catalyst was our biggest client, the account that kept our entire company afloat, and their new CEO wanted to talk to me, not to Richard, to me. I closed my laptop and walked out of that conference room knowing something had fundamentally shifted. I just didn't know yet how deep it would go. To understand what happened next, I need to go back 18 months, back to the worst period of my life, when I learned that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. My mother died on a cold morning in October, lung cancer. She'd hidden it from me until it was too late to do anything but hold her hand and watch her fade. In her last weeks, she kept saying she was sorry, but I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was apologizing for dying. After the funeral, I spent weeks going through her apartment in Tacoma. Boxes of old photographs, recipe cards written in Korean, her collection of ceramic teacups. In the back of her closet, I found a large manila envelope, sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. All from someone named James Park. My father. The father who, according to my mother, had abandoned us when I was 8 years old. The father who didn't want the responsibility of a family. The father who I'd spent 24 years hating without ever really remembering. I opened the first letter. It was dated 3 months after he'd left. Dear Daniel, I know you can't read English very well yet, so I'm writing simply, I miss you every single day. Your mother and I couldn't make our marriage work, but that has nothing to do with you. I'm sending money to help. I'll always help. Please know I love you, Dad. My hands shook as I opened letter after letter. They came monthly for years, then quarterly, then yearly. Each one said the same thing: I love you. I'm here. I'm sending money. Please write back. There were envelopes too, bank statements showing wire transfers, copies of checks made out to my mother. Thousands of dollars over the years, money I'd never seen. Money my mother told me we never had while we ate instant ramen for dinner 4 nights a week. At the bottom of the box was a note in my mother's handwriting. In Korean, I couldn't let him take you from me. I couldn't let you become too American. Forgive me. I sat on her bedroom floor until the light faded, crying in a way I hadn't since I was a child. My mother had lied. For 24 years, she'd lied. My father hadn't abandoned me. She'd hidden him from me, and she'd kept the money, or lost it, or spent it. I didn't know, but it was gone. This happened right around the time Richard was promoted to vice president at work. I was still raw, still processing. I threw myself into work because it was easier than dealing with the mess of my personal life. But Richard started changing how he treated me. Small things at first. He'd schedule client meetings without telling me, then act surprised when I didn't attend. He'd present strategies I'd written and forget to mention my name. When I brought it up, he'd say things like, "Oh, I thought it was clear it was a team effort," or, "You're so humble, Daniel. That's great, but sometimes you need to promote yourself more." Except every time I tried to promote myself, he'd find a way to redirect attention. 6 months after my mother died, I was still trying to process everything. I searched for my father online. James Park was a common name, but I found him eventually. He lived in Portland. He was a corporate consultant specializing in organizational culture and diversity initiatives. I stared at his professional photo for an hour. He looked older, grayer, but I could see my own face in his same eyes, same serious expression. I didn't contact him. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I started documenting everything at work. Every email where Richard removed my name from presentations, every meeting where he spoke over me, every client thank you note that mentioned me specifically, which Richard would acknowledge with, "We're glad the team could help." I recorded meetings too. Washington is a one-party consent state, which means I could legally record conversations I was part of. So I did. In one recording from November, Richard was talking to another manager, Susan, about restructuring the team. I was in the room, but they were talking like I wasn't there. "Daniel's great at execution," Richard said, "but leadership, I don't know. Clients want someone they can relate to. You know what I mean? He has an MBA from a top school," Susan replied. "Yeah, but it's Korean, that's different. Look, I'm not saying anything bad about Daniel. He's incredibly valuable doing what he does. But there's a reason some people lead and some people support. It's just natural." I sat there, taking notes like always, my face neutral. That night, I finally sent an email to my father, just 3 lines. "My mother passed away 6 months ago. I found your letters. Can we meet?" He responded within an hour. "I've been waiting 30 years for this message. Yes, anytime, anywhere." We met at a coffee shop in Portland on a Saturday morning. I took the train down, my stomach in knots the entire way. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say, but when I saw him sitting at a corner table, everything I'd planned disappeared. He stood up when he saw me. For a moment, we just looked at each other. "You look so much like her," he said quietly, "and so much like me." We sat down. The conversation was awkward at first, painful. I asked him why he left. He explained that my mother had wanted to move back to Korea, and he couldn't leave his career, his life in America. They'd tried to make it work, but the fighting was destroying everyone. "I never wanted to leave you," he said, his voice breaking. "I sent letters, I sent money, I called. She wouldn't let me see you. Eventually, she stopped responding entirely. I hired a lawyer, but she threatened to move back to Korea with you if I pushed. I was terrified I'd lose you completely." I told him about finding the letters. About the money I never saw. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The money doesn't matter. I would have given everything I had just to know you." "The money does matter," I said. We struggled. I worked 3 jobs to pay for community college before I got scholarships. Mom told me we had nothing, that you'd left us with nothing. James closed his eyes. "The checks I sent, they were substantial. If she didn't use them for you, I don't know what happened to them." I felt anger rise in my chest, but also something else, grief, for the relationship I could have had with this man, For the childhood I could have had without the shame of being abandoned? We talked for 4 hours that day. When I mentioned my work situation casually, his expression changed. "Tell me more about that," he said. So, I did. I told him about Richard, about being made invisible, about the comments that felt wrong, but I couldn't quite name. James leaned back in his chair. "Daniel, what you're describing isn't just bad management, it's discrimination. Subtle, yes, but it's a pattern of using your ethnicity as a justification to keep you out of leadership." He never says anything directly racist, I argued. He doesn't have to. International experience isn't the same as real experience. Clients want someone they can relate to. You're better at support roles. Those are all code plus. I've consulted for dozens of companies on exactly this issue. Something clicked into place. All those moments I'd excused, all those comments I'd rationalize, they added up to something bigger than individual incidents. "What do I do?" I asked. "Document everything," James said, "which it sounds like you're already doing. And wait for the right moment. These things have a way of revealing themselves." Over the next 3 months, my father and I met regularly. We were careful with each other, both carrying wounds, but slowly we built something new. He told me about his life, his regrets, his pride in following my career from a distance. I told him about my mother, about Korea, about feeling split between two worlds. He helped me organize my documentation from work. We created a clear timeline of Richard's behavior, cross-referenced with my performance reviews, which were always excellent, and client feedback, which was consistently positive. Then, I discovered something interesting. Catalyst Technologies, our biggest client, had a new CEO, Grace Cho, Korean American. And according to her LinkedIn, she'd graduated from Seoul National University 3 years before me. "She's asking about you," my father said after doing some quiet research through his consulting network. "Apparently she read a case study about a successful product launch in our industry, and your name was buried in the acknowledgments. She recognized the strategy as similar to something she'd tried at her previous company." Richard presented that case study, I said. "He didn't mention me once." My father looked at me seriously. "The right moment is coming, Daniel. Be ready." I wasn't ready for what happened next, though. 2 weeks after that conversation, I received a formal letter from my mother's bank. There had been an account in my name that she'd opened years ago, an account where my father's checks had been deposited. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe there was something left. Maybe after all this pain, there would be something to help me start over, to give me the freedom to leave this job if I needed to. The account balance was $847. Over 20 years of support, thousands of dollars my father had sent, reduced to almost nothing. My mother had withdrawn it over the years, using it for bills, groceries, rent. The money that was supposed to give me opportunities had simply kept us barely afloat. I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the bank statement, feeling the last bit of hope drain away. I couldn't quit my job. I couldn't take a risk. I was still living paycheck to paycheck, still trapped. That's when I called my father. "The money's gone," I said. "All of it." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I know you were hoping. I thought I could quit. I thought I could walk away and start over somewhere else." "You don't need money to do that," James said gently. "You have something more valuable. You have documentation, you have skills, and you have the truth. Money runs out. Those things don't easy for you to say," I snapped. Then immediately regretted it. But he didn't get angry. "You're right, it is easy for me to say. I have financial security. You don't, and that's partly my fault for not fighting harder to be in your life. But Daniel, I've watched companies destroy good people by making them feel like they have no choice but to stay silent. Don't let them do that to you." We talked for 2 more hours that night. He told me stories about his own career, about times he'd had to fight, about times he'd stayed silent when he shouldn't have. "The money would have made things easier," he said. "But it wouldn't have changed who you are. You're not someone who runs away, you're someone who fixes things. So, let's fix this." The meeting with Catalyst Technologies was scheduled for a Tuesday. 3 weeks after Richard's humiliating presentation about team development, Richard had been preparing for days. This was his moment to shine, to prove he deserved his promotion. The contract renewal with Catalyst was worth $2.3 million annually. Losing it would devastate our company. I was invited to the meeting only as technical support. I wasn't supposed to speak unless directly asked a question about implementation details. The conference room at Catalyst's downtown Seattle office was all glass and steel, with a view of Elliott Bay that would have been beautiful if I wasn't so nervous. Richard set up his laptop, running through his slides one more time. Our CEO, Patricia Mills, sat at the head of the table, smiling professionally. When Grace Cho walked in, the room stood up. She was smaller than I'd imagined, maybe 5'3", but she carried herself with complete confidence. She shook hands with Patricia, then with Richard, then she turned to me. "You must be Daniel Kim." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I've been looking forward to meeting you," she said, and there was something in her tone that made Richard's smile falter slightly. We all sat down. Richard launched into his presentation. It was polished, professional, full of buzzwords about synergistic partnerships and value-added solutions. I'd heard it 3 times already in practice runs. He was about 10 minutes in when Grace held up her hand. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Turner, but I have a question before we continue." "Of course," Richard said, his confidence unshaken. Grace looked directly at me. "Why isn't Daniel leading this presentation?" The room went silent. Richard's smile froze on his face. "I'm sorry," he said. "Daniel Kim," Grace repeated, gesturing toward me. "Why isn't he leading this renewal discussion?" Richard cleared his throat. "Well, as VP of Client Services, I typically handle our strategic accounts, and Daniel provides excellent support." "Support," Grace interrupted. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "That's interesting, because when we did our internal analysis of why our last 3 product launches were successful, we found something curious. Every single strategy that worked came from someone named Daniel Kim." She pulled out a folder and opened it. "We have email chains, reports, meeting notes, where your team discusses Daniel's approach or implementing Daniel's framework. In fact, Mr. Turner, in 27 documented instances over the past 2 years, you presented strategies to us that were created by Daniel." Patricia's face had gone pale, Richard's had gone red. "I can explain," Richard started. "Please do," Grace said. "Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been taking credit for someone else's work. And that makes us question whether we're actually getting value from your leadership, or whether we've been succeeding despite it." My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. Richard looked at me, and for the first time, I saw panic in his eyes. "Daniel is a valued member of our team, and we work collaboratively. Do you?" Grace turned to me. "Daniel, do you feel like you work collaboratively with Mr. Turner?" Every eye in the room turned to me. This was the moment. I could stay quiet, smooth things over, keep the peace. Or I could tell the truth. I thought about my father's words, about my mother's lies, about 5 years of being invisible. "No," I said quietly, "I don't." Richard's face crumpled. Grace nodded. "I thought not, Ms. Mills. I need to be direct with you. Catalyst Technologies is considering not renewing this contract. Not because of the quality of the work has been excellent, but because we have serious concerns about the ethical culture of your organization." Patricia found her voice. "I assure you, we take these concerns very seriously." "I hope so," Grace said. "Because here's what we'd like to propose. We'll renew the contract, but only if Daniel Kim is our primary point of contact, not as support." As the leader, the silence that followed was absolute. Patricia looked at Richard, then at me, then back at Grace. "Can we have a moment to discuss this internally?" "Of course," Grace said. "We'll step out." After Grace and her team left, Patricia turned to Richard. "What the hell is going on?" Richard tried to explain, to justify, to redirect, but Patricia held up her hand and looked at me. "Is what she said true? Have you been creating these strategies?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Inside was everything: printed emails with timestamps showing my original strategy documents, client feedback mentioning my name specifically, and a printed transcript of the recording where Richard told Susan that clients wanted someone they could relate to. "I've been documenting everything for 6 months," I said. "I wasn't planning to use it like this. I just wanted to protect myself." Patricia read through the documents, her expression growing darker with each page. When she reached the transcript, she closed her eyes. "How many people know about this?" she asked quietly. "Just me and my attorney," I said. My father had insisted I consult with an employment lawyer friend of his, just in case. Richard's voice was barely a whisper. "Daniel, come on, we're a team. Don't do this." I looked at him. "You humiliated me in front of 23 people 3 weeks ago. You've been erasing my contributions for 3 years? And you did it because you didn't think someone who looked like me should be in a leadership position? So, no, Richard, we're not a team. We never were." Patricia stood up. "Richard, you're suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation. Daniel, I need to know, do you want to lead this account?" I thought about the $847 in my mother's account, about working 3 jobs in college, about my father's letters that never reached me, about every time someone had tried to make me smaller than I was. "Yes," I said, "I do." 3 months later, I sat in my new office, the one that used to be Richard's, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Vice President of Strategic Accounts. The title still felt surreal. Richard had been terminated after the investigation revealed a pattern of behavior. I wasn't the first person of color he'd marginalized. 2 others had left the company in the previous 18 months, citing similar issues, but their complaints had been dismissed as personality conflicts. The company hired my father's consulting firm to do a full audit of their management practices. It was strange, having him walk through our office, knowing he was there because of me, but also because he was genuinely one of the best at what he did. Grace Cho became more than a client. She became a mentor. "I saw my younger self in you," she told me over coffee one morning. "People tried to make me invisible too. I just had to get loud enough that they couldn't ignore me anymore." Amanda Chen got promoted to my old position. She was the only person who'd spoken up that day in the meeting, even if it was just a whisper. I made sure she got opportunities to lead. But the biggest change wasn't professional, it was personal. My father and I had dinner every other week now. We were still learning each other, still careful sometimes, but there was something real building between us. He came to my promotion ceremony. It was the first time I'd ever had a parent at something I'd achieved. I kept one thing from my mother's apartment, a photo of the 3 of us when I was 7, before everything fell apart. I put it on my desk in a new frame with a small note card I'd written. Some stories have hidden chapters. The money would have been nice. It would have made things easier. But my father was right, I didn't need it to change my life. I needed to stop waiting for permission to be seen. On my last day in my old cubicle, I found a note someone had slipped under my keyboard. It was from another junior employee, someone I barely knew. "Thank you for not staying quiet. You gave the rest of us hope." I think about that note when things get hard. Because the truth is, leadership isn't about being the loudest person in the room. Sometimes it's about knowing when to document, when to wait, and when to finally, firmly, speak. I called my father that evening. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Terrifying," I admitted. "Like I'm waiting for someone to realize I don't belong here." "That's imposter syndrome," he said. "It's common, especially for people who've been told they don't belong. But Daniel, you earned this. Not because Grace Cho called Richard out, though that helped. You earned it through 5 years of excellent work. That speaks for itself." "I wish Mom could see this," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "I think she'd be proud, even if she'd never admit she was wrong about keeping us apart." "Do you forgive her?" I asked. "I'm working on it," he said. "Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip, it's something you choose every day. Some days are easier than others." I understood that. I was working on forgiving her too. For the lies, for the money, for the years I'd spent thinking my father didn't love me, but I was also working on forgiving myself for staying quiet so long, for doubting my own worth, for believing that making myself smaller would somehow make me safer. The office slowly emptied as evening came. I packed up the last of my things from my old Deska coffee mug, some pens, a small succulent that somehow survived 5 years of my neglect. In the bottom drawer, I found one more thing, the notebook from that terrible Tuesday morning meeting, the one where I'd written down everything Richard said. I almost threw it away. Then I decided to keep it, not as a trophy but as a reminder of where I'd been, of what it cost to stay silent, of the moment I decided I was worth more than the space someone else had decided I should occupy. My name is Daniel Kim. I'm 32 years old. I'm a VP at a marketing firm in Seattle, and I'm still learning what it means to take up space in a world that sometimes doesn't want to make room. But I'm learning something else too. That the people who try to make you invisible often do it because they're afraid of what happens when you're finally seen, and I'm done being invisible. If you're in a situation like mine, here's what I want you to know. Document everything. Find someone who believes in you, a mentor, a friend, a parent you thought you'd lost. And remember that silence isn't always strength. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. The money I thought would save me never came. But I found something more valuable: my voice, my father, and the understanding that I was never as alone as I thought I was. That's worth more than any amount in a bank account. It's been a year now since that meeting with Catalyst Technologies. Grace just offered me a position at her company chief strategy officer, double my current salary. My father cried when I told him, the good kind of crying. I haven't decided yet if I'll take it. For the first time in my life, I'm not running from something or desperately grasping at the next opportunity. I'm choosing, deliberately, on my terms. And that feeling, the feeling of having a choice, that's what freedom actually is. Not money in an account that may or may not be there, but knowing that whatever comes next, I'll face it as my full self, visible, valued, free. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, like it, and share it. See you soon.